Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. If you're here watching live, please do put a comment. Tell me who's here, where you're from, and if you have any questions, because you've been waiting for this session, I'd love to hear it. I am Heather Nelson. I'm a corporate fundraising specialist. I am the founder and owner of BridgeRaise. We are a corporate partnership consultancy that works with nonprofits at raising more money from companies. And I am so excited for our conversation today because one of the topics that we wanted to talk about all the time and have so many questions about is about the branding and marketing and visibility elements of the relationships between charities and companies. And Shelley Mayer is here today to talk to us about this. We are so fortunate to have an expert who's seen both sides of the puzzle and will be able to give us some real insights on how to be good charity partners to the companies and help raise visibilities to the causes that matter to us so much. So before we get into that, though, if you do have questions, please do put them in the chat. If we don't have time to cover them, we will come back and answer your questions in LinkedIn afterwards. So don't hesitate to put your questions there. And if you have not connected with either of us on LinkedIn, please do that. Okay. So without any further advanced chat, welcome, Shelley, to our conversation. And maybe you could tell everybody who's watching a little bit about you and RAMP.
Thanks, Heather. I'm just delighted to be here doing this with you today. So thank you for having me. As you said, I'm Shelley Mayer. I'm the founder and president of a firm called RAMP Communications. We have been around since 2011. So 14 years, and we do brand and communications work in the social impact space. So that means we're working with, as you mentioned, on both sides of the equation with charities and nonprofits, as well as with companies that want to advance their impact, stories of impact, and the scale of impact that they're having on communities and for the social good. So I'm just really passionate about businesses being a force for good. My company is a B Corp, and that idea that businesses are accountable to society and can help to advance causes is really an area of passion of mine. I guess my passion project on the side, something else that I've been engaged in the past couple of years, is starting a nonprofit of my own called Partners for Affordable Housing. So working with the founder and idea maker behind that, Jolene Livingston, to get this off the ground since 2022. So it's been really interesting being on the flip side of the equation and sort of living the nonprofit world and trying to secure these kinds of partnerships and work on the other side of the table. So that's another piece that I've been working on in recent years.
Yeah, I love that. I do think it gives you different insight when you're, inside the organization. I definitely draw from my experience from being inside organizations all the time. And I think, it gives you a different appreciation for, some of the challenges that charities face in doing this. I know that one of the things that, you're passionate about in talking about that is, yes, that of course we want corporates to invest in our charity partners and getting financial investment is important. But I also know as an expert communicator and branding expert, you also see this through like how companies can amplify these causes and bring more people to the communities around them. So tell me a little bit about what are some of the ways that charities might overlook that companies can really be a part of this.
I think, well, one of the things that I always advocate for in these kinds of partnerships is what I would consider a value partnership. So where there's elements of the value equation going in both both directions, both for the charity and for the organization that's supporting the charity. And often, in those shared value, the value is in the form of the dollars, of course. That's always great. But I think there's so many other ways that charities benefit. And so, recognizing that some of these partnerships are going to be long-term in nature, the initial gift might be small. It might be a trial gift while the charity is getting to know you as an organization. But you're getting credibility from being able to align with that corporate brand name. If it's a major bank, for example, or something like that, then that lends the credibility boost. I think we should pay close attention to the different audiences that the corporate partner can bring to the table. So there's their network of customers, business associates, of course, employees. Some of these organizations are massive and have thousands and thousands of employees, and so even just reaching those employees with your message can be really valuable. I think that idea of courage and the spark that's sometimes needed, like having had the experience with Partners for Affordable Housing in these recent stages, and really trying to get a new idea, something that's never been done before the ground, and that idea that a corporate partner can come in and when they say, yes, we believe in you and what you're doing, and we see the value in what you're doing, it gives that boost of confidence. And we heard that as well, I think, recently at the partnership conference that we were at last week between the Calgary Wild, the women's soccer team, and Synovus, and they did mention that when Synovus really came on side and said, we want to support this, we believe in what you're doing, it gave them that boost to keep going when the going was tough. So I think all of those things are really valuable.
Yeah, it's true. I want to pull out two really important things that I heard there. The credibility piece, I think, is enormous, and I do think it's really important for charities to recognize that when a company invests in them, that signals to other companies that they might be a good option as a partner, and so making sure that that is a visible thing out in the world. And I know that. Is super important. And also the employees as one of the audiences. I think this is so frequently overlooked. And I know that when you're working with clients, you make sure that there is these sort of internal communications as part of it as well. And I think that's really valuable. I'm seeing more and more partnerships actually that's purpose is sort of this internal mobilization, which requires the company to have easy messaging for their employees. I love what you're saying.
And I can even give an example of that, which is one organization that I think both of us are really familiar with is Trans-Canada Trail. And, they entered into a partnership with Manulife. And one of the big advantages, one of the ways that elements of that partnership, I guess, was that they provided a presentation about the health and wellness benefits associated with trail use and the trail, and educating Manulife employees at the trail. And Manulife's feedback was this was one of the corporate partnership presentations that they got tons of really great feedback on from their employees. And then another element of the partnership was that they were engaging the employees in the accessibility features on the trail and how to make the trail more accessible, and actually tapping into Manulife's employees to be accessibility users of the trail and provide feedback to the organization. So these are examples of where, yes, there was a monetary component to that, but the value that went in both directions that was not related to the dollars, was also quite substantial.
Yeah, that's a really great example. And what I love about that example too is it shows some creativity around the assets that the charity has, right? This sort of opportunity for the employees to participate, but also to really add value to the program is something that I know through ideation that came to light. And it's maybe not the first idea that people think of. So when you're thinking about this share value equation on the charitable side, having those conversations to think about what are some cool things we could do together is such a great opportunity that you have. That even makes me think a little bit about another question I had that I wanted to talk about. And I talk about this a lot on my side too, is this idea of how do you make sure that you're ready for those conversations? So what are some suggestions you would have around making sure that the charity is ready for, these cause shared value conversations, or these marketing communications overlap opportunities? What do company charities need to do to be ready for that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think the first point actually just dovetails off of that example that we were just talking about, which is that openness. I think open to what's possible. Like a lot of times, I think what happens is charities are very, very well, like understand the mission really well, understand the prospective solutions and what needs to happen, and kind of are jumping right to the how we solve this as a charity. And I think that being open to approaching the corporate partnership conversation with what are some possibilities for how to address this mission that might not be exactly what our how has already like mapped out, right? So I think being open and approaching the conversation as a learning journey, as a co-creation, and really understanding where the company's coming from in terms of what their objectives are with the partnership, what they're trying to get out of it, but also what they bring. Like, what are the things, because there might even be things that the charity hasn't even thought of that the corporate is able to bring to the mix that would really elevate or amplify what they're trying to do, and they aren't even aware of it. So I think just being open to that would be number one. I think that there is, a readiness around reputation that needs to be there. So even if you're, an early organization, or you're more nascent in nature, I think having a polished and professional like brand and brand story, like, having your materials that look nice and together, and having clarity in your messaging, being able to really communicate in a polished and professional way, makes you a more valuable part for that brand. I think that another area is being able to really succinctly explain the impact that you have as an organization, and being able to align that impact with the company's priorities. A lot of organizations jump into more the how, like these are all the things that we do, but I think most companies are looking for what are the outcomes of those things, and what is the social benefit that's being created. And so being able to have that story really clear, and ideally even be able to demonstrate it with data and impact metrics and measurements would be the top thing. Not all organizations are at a stage where they're able to do that yet, or maybe they need to rely on the company's investment to support them in doing that. But I think coming to the table understanding that's what companies are going to be looking for is really important.
Yeah, it definitely is, and I think it's coming up more and more often. And one of the things I think that that speaks to is, I think often one of the things you mentioned around clarity, often I find that organizations, charities, because they're solving quite complex problems, often the metrics they have are very detailed and quite vast. And one of the things I feel is important, especially for the corporate conversation, is this simplification and clarification. And that's not to say that we don't ever want to bring our partners into the complexity. But at the beginning, I think that the simplification piece, it makes a huge difference. And I know that as part of the branding work you do with clients, you help them, do that, right? The sort of simplification of the messaging.
Yeah, I think it's true. Like, it's both simplification of the impact story, like you said, and even like metrics and numbers and all of that. But even of the messaging, like, I think that it's not important that everyone understands, like, as organizations, we're often really proud of like all the different programs we have and all of the amazing ways we contribute. And it's like being able to say that we do all of these things can be where organizations want to gravitate to, but being able to really speak to the the succinct story of the impact that all of that is creating. I think, thinking of it, like tiers of communication, right? And making sure that your message hierarchy is really solid. And once you draw someone in with that initial succinct story, then, the more interested people get is where you can begin to unpack more detailed stories of more elements of your program and services.
I love that. And that speaks to something that you said earlier of thinking of it more as like a journey. Over time, you're going to see these different things. I agree with that as well. I think that's a really important way of thinking about your communications journey with a corporate partner. It doesn't all have to be at once. It can happen over time. I also want to circle back to your openness comments, because I think that is something that maybe we could spend another minute on, in that one of the tensions I sometimes see between marketing materials is like, once that's all figured out, I think sometimes organizations, charities think, okay, this is the thing I'm going to use, and they don't allow for like the conversation around it. So do you have any suggestions maybe about that? Like, yes, get your branding done, but how do you make sure that there's still this opportunity for flexibility in the conversation, and once they have these materials in place, maybe?
Yeah, I think well, one of the things that we sometimes help companies do is build what we refer to as a communications plan, and that is looking at different audiences and where is that audience at? What is their current headspace? What might they know about this? What is their current belief or perception? And what do we want them to think, know, or believe or feel? And what is a key message or a couple key messages that are going to move that individual from here to there? And so I kind of see communications that it's really taking more of like a toolkit approach, right? Like you're going to know who these various audiences are that you might be connecting with. And like, if we take the corporate partners example we said earlier, like you can be tapping into the corporate partners' customers. You can tap into their business associates. We see this sometimes with golf tournaments, right? Where, a recipient charity, and then it's all the companies' vendors, say, that are invited to the golf tournament. You're tapping into their employees. And each of those kinds of audiences might be quite different. They might have a different relationship with your cause and the message that you're trying to craft. So understanding how different key messages will resonate with different audiences is really important. And then I see it almost like being able to pull together the right stories that are going to hit those messages for that audience in a way that's just going to be the most meaningful to them and resonate the most with them. So I think that's one aspect. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think that's very helpful, because I think that what you're demonstrating is both, to some extent, it has to be a bit flexible, right? Like, yes, you start with, the ideas and branding and messaging, but then, it's nuanced for these different audiences. So you go back to your toolkit, you pull different things for different audiences. And I think that that's an important message for charities to grab onto, because I think sometimes they fall into the trap of having the one thing and trying to use it for everybody, and then then are disappointed if it's not working. And I think this idea of using it as a launching off point for a conversation, for a relationship, is so much more rich and can get you to such better partnerships.
So if I can jump in on one more point that this is making me think of, which I think another thing is, when you're approaching a corporate partnership, understanding, is the partner more interested in the cause that you're addressing with your solution, or are they interested in you, in the work you're doing as an organization, and telling the story of your organization? Because those are also two different things. And again, that's being open in the initial conversation with the partner about what they're trying to get out of it. Because sometimes a partner might want to really get behind a cause and amplify the cause, and that might require different communications than if the partner wants to help tell the story of your organization. And both are beneficial. And, obviously we always want our own organizations to getting lift from these things, but sometimes when we're working on some of these complex social challenges, meeting the partner where they want to be is also important. So, if you're, and I guess the point is, if your communications that you're feeding them with are too focused on you as an organization and not as focused on the social issue or the big picture, that might be a mismatch for what that partner's looking for. So again, part of that early conversation about being open to what are they trying to achieve and how do they want to show up in the context of this cause and issue and story that you're working on solving together.
I think that's brilliant. I hope everyone's writing down that question, because I think that's a really great question to be asking when you're having these early discovery calls, right? Instead of assuming they want to elevate your specific charity, it may be a cause-related alignment. We talk about this alignment idea all the time on my side of things. I'm sure on your side of things too. This, like, if we're trying to create shared value, there has to be alignment. So the question is the alignment, to your point, is the alignment on cause, or is it on the story and impact of this particular organization, or something else? I mean, we both know we see other business reasons for these relationships, and knowing what one you're helping them address will make the biggest difference in how you build out the partnership. So you've already started to tease a little bit about what they're thinking on their side. I'd like to ask a little bit more about that. If you could, sort of impart some things to the nonprofits about what a company might be doing ahead of reaching out to them, what they may be thinking about already before they call or before they answer your call, what would be some things that you would tell the charity from the company perspective?
Yeah. Well, what I guess I would start from, like, if I was advising a company, what I'm telling that company to think about before they're necessarily reaching out. And I always like to encourage companies to choose social causes that they can really align with strategically. So thinking about how do the talents and expertise and what are the gifts as an organization we bring uniquely to the world, and how can our gifts and talents be used in a way that is also solving social issues or causes or needs, fulfilling social needs. And so the companies, I think the homework that I would see them or like to see them doing because they're reaching out to partners is understanding really how can they offer something unique and different and show up, and what causes are they most likely aligned to. So if they've done that homework, they're going to have a good sense coming into things where they, what kind of impact they want to have, and what they think they can bring to the table. So that's something. I think as well, organizations may be thinking about, do we have a AV problem or?
I'm good.
You're good. Okay, I'm hearing a weird noise, but I'll just assume that maybe that's just me. And so I think also thinking about whether the partnership is long-term in nature or short-term in nature, or how deep they want that partnership to go, how they want to engage their employees, and what different engagement strategies they want, what audiences do they want to reach as part of what sometimes when organizations are aiming to partnerships, they are also wanting to reach audiences that they haven't tapped into before. And so thinking about what kinds of audiences they want to reach. So these are all some of the things I think that companies should be thinking about beforehand, and initial discovery conversations with some of that in mind. And again, to our earlier point, want to approach these as like, even those first meetings, like we want to approach those meetings as opportunities to start to build that alignment and build that mutual understanding, and just, you know, start building that relationship, right? Like no it's going to come out of like a single first meeting where you say, here's all the amazing things we're doing, and they say, yes, we're going to give you like $5 million.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
Okay, I'm not sure what I am seeing in the comments. Thanks for all the people who are participating in the comments. I am seeing in the comments that the audio sound, whatever that is elsewhere. I can't hear it, so I apologize. I hope that it goes away. We're getting near the end, so hopefully it has just started and we've got all the good value out. But yes, I think if I was going to wrap up several things that have come through here, this idea of openness, questions, conversation, thinking about it as a relationship, the more clear that people, honestly, on both sides, it sounds like that answer, you're like asking or saying the companies should have these answers before they really enter into these conversations. And we also want the charities to have clarity around the impact they have, what offers and ideas they have as well, but also an openness on both sides to figure out where the like intersection is, right? I love the term you used at the beginning. What did you say? Shared value partnerships?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that really requires this combination of knowing what your own value is, but also being open to the combination, which I think is fantastic.
I think as well, like if we approach those conversations authentically, everybody should be able to be open and transparent about what doesn't fit, you know, what isn't going to work. I think that, you know, we're not always going to be able to align like, you know, the needs of our mission and our organization to like what that organization is trying to do and accomplish. And sometimes like you hit them, and, you know, in that Manulife example that we gave earlier, some of the goals that Manulife had set out for themselves and are looking to align with, you know, were really, there was a great deal of affinity between what TransCanada Trail brought to the table and had to offer. And so that was a natural fit. But, you know, there's many other cases where, you know, I know from a previous conversation with the lead Manulife that was running that partnership, like there's other times when there's an organization that approaches them and it's just not a fit. And if we're clear as companies what we are trying to accomplish, we can get to that, like, is there alignment or is there not alignment? You want to try to get to that decision quickly and not be stringing one another along, because then it's just really wasting everyone's time, right? So I think that would be another thing, is just being open to no, and, you know, no is okay too if it's just not the right fit, because it's probably not going to be a fruitful long-term partnership if, you know, it's too forced.
Yeah, it's a really good message, and not meant to be a downer message. I think that for all of us, it's a good reminder, you know, look for alignment and be really honest when there isn't, because all of us are time starved, or many of us are time starved. And, you know, it's almost a favor to just say, this isn't going to work, and keep going. So
yeah, and managing these partnerships, you know, takes time and energy from your organization. And so ultimately you want to find the ones that are in it for the most long-term strategic value, that are going to bring the most impact to your cause. And so I think, you know, if you're looking at it from that lens, it's not just like about the check that this company could write for me, but it's also what is the impact that they're going to help us achieve with, you know, with their interest, passion, and excitement for our cause as well, right?
Yeah, that's a perfect full circle moment, in that we started this conversation talking about all the things that a company could bring to the partnership beyond money, the visibility, the passion, their employees, maybe some new ideas, things that, you know, the charity didn't even anticipate. So that can be a really fulsome partnership. I get asked all the time, you know, I want multi-year partnerships, I want long-term partnerships. And what you've just outlined is really some of the strategies that make that happen. You can start with like an initial investment or an initial thing, and then over time add these other things on, because it does take time to develop a relationship like you're talking about that has these different components. And it may take engaging, some marketing help or some communications help or some different things like that to fully realize that. And again, those are things that you might do over a period of time. I know that's, the example, all of the examples that you gave are things that evolved over time. So good for people to think about that. We've run out of time. There's a bunch of questions. Thanks to the people who've put questions in the comments. I think some of the questions it looked like we sort of answered as we were going. So hopefully that was the case. If there's any of them that we didn't, we will make sure to follow up. And so both the people who asked the questions have an answer, but also anybody listening can check those out. So before we go, Shelley, I'm sure that everybody is going to want to learn more from you. How can they do that?
Yes. So you can find our firm, Ramp Communications, at ramp.agency. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm sure that will be all connected in the LinkedIn Live, but I'm Shelley L. Mayer on LinkedIn. So I would say those are the two best ways to connect with me. There's a button on our website where you can 15-minute consult with me as well, using my Calendly link. So yeah, I'm excited to talk further with anybody who was inspired by anything I said during this discussion, and would love to hear more about your organizations and what you're trying to accomplish through partnerships.
That is perfect. Thank you so much, Shelley, for being here today. Thanks to all who have listened or are listening on replay. Don't hesitate to follow me for future LinkedIn Lives. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments or DM me in LinkedIn, and I will make sure to get back to you. Thanks so much, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, Heather. Bye.